Music is a dream from which the veils have been lifted. It's not even the expression of a feeling, it's the feeling itself. This quote from a letter sent by Debussy to his friend Andrzej Poniatowski might not have been referring to any specific piece, but it's difficult to find better words than these to capture the essence of his most famous work, Clair de Lune. It might be one of the most ubiquitous and widely heard pieces of piano music ever written, but despite the reimaginings as pop songs, the countless reorchestrations and uses in films like the original Fantasia or Ocean's 11, Clair de Lune remains an addictively captivating and crystalline expression of the inexpressible. From its first tentative notes to its final assured cadence. But I think to understand why this is the case, and why out of all of Debussy's piano music, Clair de Lune is the one that's become so loved, we need to look at how it came into existence and how it sits within the cultural and aesthetic world in which it was written. Let's deconstruct Debussy's Clair de Lune. Most people will know this music as a standalone piece, but it's actually one of 4 movements of a piano suite that was started by Debussy in 1890, the Suite Bergamasque. At this point, when Debussy was only 28 years old, he hadn't had any of his piano music published, and he was keen to start writing more for the instrument. And so he devised a 4-movement work for piano made up of a prelude, a minuet, a pavane, whose title was eventually changed to passe-à-pied, and a 3rd movement, which he initially called Promenade Sentimentale. From the outset, Debussy was hearkening back to the Baroque era with these names. The minuet and pavane, or passe-à-pied, are all dance forms, and the music that he would eventually write for these movements, as well as for the prelude, invokes the playing of 18th century French harpsichordists like Rameau and Couperin, with improvisatory, arabesque-like swirls and flourishes. Debussy even referred to Couperin as the most poetic of our harpsichordists, whose tender melancholy is like that enchanting echo that emanates from the depths of a Watteau landscape. So often Debussy's work is aligned with that of Impressionists or Symbolists, but Debussy here is calling on a completely different era of art and music. Watteau and Couperin instead of Degas or Monet. So how does this 3rd movement, the Promenade Sentimentale, fit into this context? This is the movement that would eventually be called Clair de Lune, but there is some debate as to whether it was written with the other movements in 1890 or instead around 1905, when Debussy was preparing the suite for first publication. It's generally thought that it was sketched with the others, primarily because of the musical ideas that link each of the movements. In bar 11 of the prelude, for example, we find a falling figure in thirds that's copied in a rhythmically compressed form in the minuet, and then in a rhythmically augmented form in the opening of Clair de Lune. Of course, this could have been done by Debussy in 1905 to create a cohesive set, but Clair de Lune does fit stylistically with the others and aligns with Debussy's more youthful approach to writing. What we do know about this movement, though, is that it was singled out as it was the only one that was given a non-standard title. Both versions of the name, Promenade Sentimentale and Clair de Lune, come from the titles of poems written by Debussy's favourite poet and his contemporary, Paul Verlaine. The first of these poems is a melancholic depiction of loneliness. A sole protagonist walks alone in the dying light of the day through a strange and cold dreamscape. and the thick shroud of shadows came to drown the final rays of the setting sun in their pale waves. It's difficult to reconcile the visceral pain of this poem with Dubassy's music, but we do get a much closer alignment when we pair the music with a Verlaine poem that was eventually chosen as inspiration for this movement, Clair de Lune. This is taken from Verlaine's Fêtes Galantes, a set of 24 poems inspired by the Rococo painting style of the same name, used to describe the work of Antoine Watteau. Watteau's works depicted aristocrats, couples and groups at play and rest, usually bathed in sunlight, but sometimes in darkness or shadow. But it was not the narrative or the setting that inspired Verlaine or Debussy, but instead the character of the paintings, the atmosphere. The balance of light and dark, the interplay between magic and realism, between dream and reality, or between comedy and tragedy. Verlaine, in his Fêtes Galantes, creates a symbolic portrait of his love in the subtle art of Watteau, crafting a universe that is his own, internal and nostalgic, but which has an unmistakable atmosphere that can be traced back to Watteau's paintings. And in Clair de Lune, this atmosphere is placed in the context of an unmistakably Watteauesque setting, the Commedia dell'arte and the Bergamasque, a 16th century folk dance that originated in northern Italy. Verlaine talks of dancing masquerades and Bergamaskers hidden behind disguises, singing and playing folk instruments. But despite the festival and celebratory atmosphere, the poem is tinged with sadness. While singing in a minor key of victorious love and the pleasant life, they seem not to believe in their own happiness, and their song blends with the light of the moon. This invokes the fundamental idea that's at the centre of not only Watteau's paintings, but also the Commedia dell'arte, the idea of happiness tinged with sadness. And it's in this context that we need to view and understand Debussy's Suite Bergamasque and his Clair de Lune. Debussy's music for Clair de Lune instantly evokes the feeling of the Bergamasque. The opening exists in a space between light and darkness. We hear two minor thirds, which could either be the tonic and third of F minor, or the third and fifth of D flat major. And even as it introduces the D flat major tonality, in the first 8 bars, we never hear a D flat in the bass. Instead, we get a lot of unsettled harmony. The second bar gives us a diminished chord, and the fifth gives us an F dominant 7th first inversion, implying a B flat minor tonality. And it's only when we get to the 9th bar that we finally hear pure D flat major. These first 8 bars are also metrically unstable. In the melody, we find a mixture of triple and duple rhythms, giving a rocking, atemporal feel to the music. But we also find that the melody never changes note on the downbeat of the bar, so the important beats never feel stressed. Neither the meter nor the harmony are settled here. The music exists in a liminal space between earth and sky, between dream and reality. As Debussy then repeats the melody, we find subtle and deliberate changes have been made. The arabesque descending line from the first 8 bars refuses to move too far away from its opening notes, stopping short of falling downwards in the same way as the opening melody. The harmony and texture have also changed. The music is now built around the subdominant G flat major. And we also get these new block chords, marking a shift away from the intricate voice leading and sung quality of the lines found in bars 1 to 8. But what this change in texture does do is set us up for the second half of section 1, which also uses almost entirely block chords, marking out minor harmony laced with dissonance and ambiguity. We hear pained minor seconds and widely spaced clashes between the bass and the melody. The melody itself has the same character as what we've heard before, but again, it's different here, heard as part of these repeated chords, giving the music an insistent, yearning feel. In a very short space, Debussy has created a musical world that is full of contrasts, and that forces a listener to engage, to ask questions, to feel that for a moment they had been dreaming of an imaginary country, as Debussy puts it. At the beginning of the second stanza of Verlaine's Clair de Lune, he talks about the characters singing in a minor key of love and happiness, giving us the purest expression of the Bergamasque feeling. And at the beginning of section 2 of Debussy's piece, we find a musical translation of this feeling. We hear pure D-flat major, which is juxtaposed harshly with the flattened 3 chord F-flat major over A-flat. Joy and sadness at the same time. This section also introduces a completely new texture. The 16th note arpeggios give life to the music, changing the nature and feeling of the melody, and providing the impetus for the enharmonic transposition that's about to happen. After the music fails to settle in any harmonic center, we get a reintroduction of the alternating D-flat, F-flat major harmony, which then pivots by the enharmonic equivalents of A-flat and G-sharp into an E major or C-sharp minor tonality. This section has some of the most animated music in the piece. This is Verlaine and Watteau's dance, full of joy and movement. But before it can reach a climax, the music returns again to D-flat major via another enharmonic transposition. The orchestration has changed again, with the 16th note figure from the previous idea now creating a foundation of warm harmony underneath. We hear melodies and counter-melodies in the left and right hands, pushing the music higher and higher until we finally get back to section A. The melody has returned, but we now seem to be so far away from D-flat major. It's repeated but not the same, full of changes, accidentals and borrowed harmony. At the centre of Verlaine's aesthetic, and at the centre of Verlaine's Clair de Lune, is the idea of repetition of words and ideas. But with each repetition, something changes. In his poem, he repeats the words Clair de Lune twice in adjacent lines, but the second time, it's suffused with a calm sadness. And in the same way, Debussy has repeated the melody from the opening, but it's now weighed down by melancholy. The birds dreaming in the trees and the fountains sobbing in ecstasy. This idea of change with repetition is brought out even more during the final time we hear the melody. Debussy introduces a note here that I've always struggled with, a C-flat. Instead of pure D-flat major, we get the major chord with a flattened 7th in the bass. This is such a sudden dissonance where you'd expect clean, consonant harmony. But with everything I know about this piece now, it feels completely appropriate. This note tolls like a bell through this last section, seeping into our consciousness, reminding us of the darkness that lives alongside the light. And as the music returns to the unsettled harmony of the middle section, and as the melody rises to the end, we're reminded here of the tall, slender fountains and birds dreaming in their trees of Verlaine's poem. We're asked by Debussy in these final notes to look to the sky, and through the deep darkness of the night, find hope in the light of the moon. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this journey through art, poetry and music. And if you did, you might enjoy my video on Hokusai's The Great Wave and how it relates to Debussy's La Mer. I put a link to it in the description below. I can't thank everyone enough who's already signed up to my Patreon account. They're really the reason why I can keep making these videos. So if you'd like to support my work, and if you'd also like to get early access to all my new videos, then you can also sign up using the link in the description. See you next time.